Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome to the follow-up training for Asia Pacific Winter School participants and policy evaluation for school participants. This is the eighth follow-up training that we are having. So I'd like to welcome everyone. So I am Praveen Nanisa Shrestha. I am co-leader of Evaluate Asia. I am based in Kathmandu, Nepal. And before we start the session, I would like to present some ground rules. This is for ensuring that we have smooth session without any audiovisual disruptions. So first of all, for your name format, I would like to request you to follow this format while you rename yourself in the Zoom. The format is you can start with your first name, last name, and gender pronouns. For example, we have an example here, so you can refer to the example. So we start with first name, last name, and then gender pronoun. And for ensuring that we have no audio visual disturbances, it would be great if you could mute yourself and keep your camera off when you are not speaking. When you are speaking or putting a question, we will ask you to unmute yourselves and put your camera on. And if you have any questions during the session, you can type in the question in the chat or take note of the questions, and we will later give the floor for you the questions. And if you have any tech-related questions, if you need any tech-related support, you can type in the chat as well. The objective of the training is there are two objectives. The first one is to enhance knowledge and skill in qualitative interviewing for evaluation studies. And the second one is to strengthen the evaluation networks in Asia Pacific and to connect young emerging evaluators with more experienced evaluators. Now with this, I would like to introduce Bimba, who is co-leader of Evaluate Mongolia. So Bimba, over to you for the opening remarks. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Praveen. Hi, everyone. My name is Bimba. I'm a co-leader of Evaluate Mongolia chapter. So I'm very honored to welcome all of you to the eighth follow-up training for Asia Pacific Winter School and Fall School. We thank all of you for taking the time to join us. Also, I would like to thank you for submitting very interesting and practical questions. So today's topic is qualitative interviewing for evaluation studies, which is presented by Taruna Gupta, Secretary General of European Evaluation Society. I have no doubt that this training will be fruitful for all of us, since we are discussing one of the most needed skills in evaluation. Thank you very much. Happy learning, and over to you, Praveen. Thank you.
Thank you, Bimba. Now we would like to start the session. So I would like to introduce Taruna Gupta, like Bimba introduced. She is Secretary General of European Evaluation Society, and the topic of our presentation is qualitative interviewing for evaluation studies. So I would like to hand over to Taruna for her presentation.
Thanks, Jotin. So can everyone see my screen okay? I'm sorry, with this mode, I wouldn't be able to see your faces because I'm in presenter mode. So just please let me know, okay? So like Bimba has said, thank you so much for many of you. We sort of sent a questionnaire at the beginning of this training session. I wouldn't call it so much a training session because it's very short, but I'm hoping to cover a lot of material. So I'm really grateful to you for sending some really great questions about interviewing, and we're going to go through those today. This is a 100% tailored training session. So there's nothing outside of the questions that were asked, but as we go on, feel free to ask questions at any time. My speaking time is about 30 minutes, and I've tried to make it very engaging. Also, a lot of people submitted questions saying we would like everything from start to end about interviewing. And it's not possible to cover such a breadth of material in 30 minutes. So one thing I wanted to suggest to you is just look for qualitative research methods books that can give you a very comprehensive understanding. But as we go through this session, maybe I can give you some also some pointers and other things. a lot of the interviews these days are online, on the phone, and some are in person. So when I've developed this training, I've sort of kept in mind both doing interviews in person and online. But if you're having some sort of specific challenge or you want to talk more in depth about this, just let me know. Also, one thing that I want to share with you is there's no standard way in which you can do an interview. Everyone sort of has their own way of doing things. And today I'm sharing my way of doing things. Just to let you know that sometimes I've tried to, when I've had 2 or 3 evaluations going on at the same time, I've tried to create like a checklist of this, and do it this way, just to shorten the time of doing my evaluation. And that's just never worked for me. I always think that I have to start from scratch, because as soon as I copy and paste something from a previous evaluation, I'm just opening myself to mistakes. And the other thing that I find is that I stop thinking really carefully about developing the topic guide or something, or, just the details. So one thing that I am going to start with is that every time you're developing your topic guide for your interviews or even the letters, I never copy them. I write them from scratch for every project, every initiative, and every context. So that's the first thing I wanted to say to you guys. Now, moving on, I really want you guys to be very, very, very careful when you talk in terms of your terminology. A lot of questions sort of were referring to the interviews as surveys. They were talking about sample size and things like this. I don't know exactly what is the experience level of this group, but one thing I want you to sort of try to remember is that when you're writing a proposal, when you are a young emerging evaluator trying to get onto a team with more senior evaluators, confusing this terminology can be very, very dangerous, because someone might disregard you just because you were confused. So be very careful to understand there's a very clear distinction between qualitative and quantitative research. Quantitative research is looking for a truth, some kind of truth and all that. And qualitative research is about understanding a diversity of views, comprehensive, you're trying to be comprehensive. You're trying to get what many people think. You're not trying to converge, you're trying to diverge almost in a way, right? So try to remember that. A lot of people often ask me how many interviews is enough. And I say that the point at which you're getting saturation is enough. So for those of you who have done evaluations already, they'll reach a point when you're doing your interviews that you're just hearing the same thing over and over again. And I think at that point, you can safely sort of say that, yeah, this is the point at which we don't need more interviews. I really don't like to give a number, but if I must, it's about 40. 40 is considered to be a good number of interviews. Okay, so I got this question, the question in bold, which says, and I'm sorry if you don't, the question says responding, providing symptoms because it is what they feel, tough and see rather than give the real issues and their causes. So this is not the most clear question for me, but one thing that I understood from it is that this person feels that what the respondents are saying to the question is not good enough. And I really wanted to clarify that why do we conduct interviews, right? We're trying to seek and understand what is the meaning and perception of people. I've used Halcom's epistemological parables here, and some of you might be familiar with them from Michael Quinn-Patton's book, but there's a story of Halcom. He had 3 researchers with him, and he sent them to a market with a vow of silence. And he told them that all you have to do is you have to go to different markets every day and tell me what you observe, and you have to come back as truth seekers. So after 6 months of having a vow of silence, the first researcher came And he sort of said that I saw that the same people come to the market, they buy things which are basic, and then they walk in the streets with their friends and go home. The second one said that I saw the same thing. And when I was I saw the same thing, and I felt that people always want just very basic things. And he said, that's what I learned. The third researcher said that I learned nothing because I have no idea why these people were coming to the market. I don't know where they went, who they left behind them. And he just had endless number of questions. And Halcom told the third researcher that you are actually in the right place. And that's why I took this quote from that story, that each person you question can take you into a new part of the world. And the skilled questioner and active listener know how to enter into another person's experience. And if you ask and listen, the world will always be new. And this is what it's sometimes when we're doing qualitative and we've come from our educational backgrounds, which are very quantitative, we sometimes can't understand this concept very well, that we are not looking at just triangulation. So don't forget that the reason we do interviews is to find out the things that we can't directly observe, right? We can't observe people's feelings, we can't observe their thoughts, we can't observe their intentions, we can't observe behaviors that have taken place when we weren't there. We can't understand, like, for example, I'm going to talk in programs now, right? So if you have a bed nets program, we can't understand what value people give to those bed nets that have been given by a donor. And so this is why we're sort of conducting interviews, right? And I think that it's really important that we shouldn't be dismissive of anyone's opinions, because this is then creating a bias. I'm not sure if the person is in the room and if I've grasped the point of this question or feedback that was given on the survey, but I just want to reiterate that throughout the interview, our goal is to encourage the interviewee to share as much information as possible without being self-conscious and in his own words. Okay. I got 2 questions, and I think that they relate to building rapport with the people whom we are interviewing. So the first sort of feedback was, how can you share effective approaches to ensure that the interviewees are comfortable and at ease in answering questions? And how, okay, this question has many parts. We will come to part of it later, but it's how to convince participants who are illiterate in developing countries and who gave fewer responses to interview questions. It was observed that most of them get fed up in just 15 minutes. Does a qualitative interview count when it lasts for 15 minutes? Okay, so it's really important to understand that right now, interviews are short. It's a short engagement with someone you don't know, and that creates a sort of a distance just naturally. And obviously going online has not helped the interviewing process and especially building rapport. But if it's done well before and during interview, I've seen that it can cause a big difference. And so now I'm going to sort of give you some tips of what you can do before and during your interview process to sort of build rapport. So when I'm selecting the people to be interviewed, many times the program manager will give me a list of these are the people that you need to interview, right? And I'm going to say that, okay, this is the person who I'm going to interview, and why am I interviewing them? I actually have a column next to their name, and what sort of information will they be able to give you, right? And then you send out your invites. I am working as an independent contractor, and I never tend to send my emails from Gmail. I think that sometimes it can come across unprofessional, or people can sometimes just disregard the email. If I have had to do it on my evaluations, I copy in the project managers so that in case someone says, oh no, I don't know who this is, the project manager can follow up, right? So this is all part of building rapport because you're building up your credibility. And in your invitation letters for your interview, you absolutely have to draft a short summary of the project. And in the most simplest of terms, don't use any jargon, and really explain to someone why you're contacting them. Explain to them that you value their input, right? The other thing is that if by any chance, when you're looking at the list of people who need to be interviewed, and there's any sort of proximity to them, what I mean is in terms of your age, or you actually know them, always choose to interview them, because it's always easier to interview someone and they're more likely to be truthful to you when you know them. A lot of people think that this introduces some bias, but I don't believe it does, because I think that someone being more open with you can trump the bias. And one other thing in terms of building rapport, feminist evaluation has talked about this, participatory action research has talked about this, is being very responsive to the people whom you're interviewing. So say they come back with questions, or some of them ask you, can you send me all the questions you'll be interviewing them? You'll be interviewing, just send them. I see that there's just no problem with this. The question over here suggests that the people get tired after 15 minutes, and is it a valid interview? Yes, any data is data, and 15 minutes is a valid interview. Many times I've had very senior level directors at big international organizations, and they say, you have 10 minutes to talk to me. So another way of building rapport, which I find very effective, is from my interview questions, I say, what does this person need to answer that nobody else can tell me? And even with these people who have a lower level of education, instead, if they're getting tired, then your job as the evaluator is to say, okay, what is it that this person has to tell me that nobody has to tell me? It's not a matter of going through absolutely every question in your topic guide, right? Because this is going to cause them to disengage. The other thing is that I see that when people, especially in the villages, and they're hesitant to reply to you, you haven't done enough to break down the power dynamics. So, you've created a hierarchy. When we were in the field and we were doing interviews, we don't go in a car to the villages. We try to take a tuk-tuk or something like this. We don't create that I am better than you. We don't wear suits or something. It's about find ways to break down these barriers of perceptions. When I'm interviewing a director or someone in a village, the only difference that I change is what I'm wearing. With some directors, maybe I'll suit up and things, and I'll go more simpler when I'm out in the field. But nothing changes the way, in terms of my kindness, the way I approach them, and I value each person the same way, right? And this is what I suggest that everyone does, is whatever you can do, break down those power barriers, that you are not an important evaluator. It's the person who you're talking to who's more important. There was someone who I was working with not long ago, and I think he was working in Middle East, and he was telling me that one of his biggest challenges is that as an evaluator, his salary is higher than the government counterparts that he's going to interview. And what happens is they're completely always disengaged. They're so angry with him for having a higher salary. So the best thing he could do was to, show them that he's nothing different, to, step down and really respect the people you're interviewing. One other thing that I've found, especially with government, is that when you tell them that the interview, at the beginning, I always say this interview is confidential, it's anonymous, and any recordings will be deleted. Obviously, I asked them for permission. Many people don't want the interviews recorded, and that's completely fine. And I also always tell them that what they say will be matched against other people in a thematic analysis. So we're looking for patterns amongst what people have said during our analysis. When I explain this, it really puts people at ease because they feel like, okay, everything I say isn't going to, they don't feel like it's going to condemn them, because this is one of the big challenges with self-reported data. And I'm a bit conscious of time, but later on, if we have time, I will talk to you about the 4 stages of interview, which is, there's a stage of apprehension in the beginning, then exploration, preparation, and participation. If I don't have time to cover it, you can just Google Spardley. I'll put it in the chat later. That's the author who's talked about these 4 stages of interview. And, you can become more familiar with how that works in terms of building rapport, but just your general approach to interviewing. Okay, so I'm just going to pause there in case anyone has any questions, because I'm just going on and I can't see your faces.
Yeah, hi everyone. If anyone has a question, please feel free to unmute yourself, or you can also type your question in the chat.
Okay, thanks. So I'm just going to continue. And we had, so this question about the people with less education, I personally feel when I read that question for the first time, my immediate reaction was that their interview topic guide is wrong, that they haven't prioritized their questions right, they haven't thought about the person they're interviewing, and so this is what's gone wrong. Why their respondents are getting fed up in 15 minutes. And then we had a question of how do you handle irrelevant answers and cross questions. So I'm just going to go through a bit about developing your topic guide. And I know some of you might not have heard it and you call it a questionnaire. Again, just some quick brief. There are 3 types of interviews: structured interviews, unstructured interviews, and semi-structured interviews. Most of the time when we do evaluations, we're doing semi-structured interviews. And structured interviews have interview questionnaires. But when you do semi-structured interviews, you develop a topic guide. Why is it called a topic guide? Because of its flexibility. You don't have to ask the questions in a certain order. And the other thing that you can do is you can sort of add and remove questions as you go along. And we're going to talk about that as now. So one of the big things, one of my mentors normally says is that people want an opportunity to talk, and evaluation is an opportunity for them to do this. And this is probably why you are hearing this irrelevant answers and cross questions. It's because someone feels that they're being valued at that moment. So some ways to sort of navigate it is, first of all, when you develop your topic guide, always let your evaluation questions guide you, right? That's how your goal is to answer the evaluation questions, which are in your terms of reference. So this is your first guide. But there's nothing better than to have a good interview. You need to have good desk review. And by that, I mean that if they've sent you 100 documents, make sure you've gone through most of those documents, because people are really notoriously bad when you're interviewing them to remember facts, to refer to documents. They're like, yeah, that happened in 2016. It really didn't happen in 2016. They're like, yeah, that project, which was like this, was called card F, this, that, and it's nothing. Like, they're so notoriously bad at this. And if you've done a good desk research, you have your facts. a timeline of your facts, right? So I always have a timeline of what happened during the scope, which is the time scope of my interview. And I know what's happened. And so when they refer to a document or they refer to an event, I'm like, is it this one? And they're like, yeah. And it's very rare that someone is talking about something that I haven't read about in an interview. And that's what's called doing a good desk review. And if you do this, even when you're interviewing very senior people, you will get a lot of respect from them because they feel that, yes, you've done the work required to be interviewing them. And sometimes so many people appreciate it. And even more when you're interviewing people outside that particular organization, like if it's an NGO and you're talking to another NGO, so many times they're like, oh, will you share that report with me? So you're already becoming a source of value to them in a way, even though that's not the part of the evaluation. So just, I really, really emphasize that if you want to have a good topic guide, always do good desk research. The worst kind of interviews are where people have not done desk review and they're asking what happened in the project in the interview. This is really, really, really considered bad practice in my opinion. So we've already talked about before every interview, you have to talk about confidentiality, permission to record, and anonymity. And I always, and this is about the 15 minutes again, I always check that they still have, say the interview is normally about 1 hour. I'll say, do you still have 1 hour for this interview? This makes it a bit more difficult for someone to say after 15 minutes, I have to go. But it also helps me plan, because if it means that I can't go through all my questions, I have my priority questions to ask them. And so it's better, right? And I always explain to them what the project is about in 2 or 3 sentences. People forget, even though you emailed them yesterday, they should have prepared for the interview. Most people don't. So when you remind them that this is what you want from them, this is what is going to happen, and you tell them that I have 10 questions for you for this interview, it's really, really helpful. Now, if you, one thing I want to say is when you start an interview, it's really important to say, people are apprehensive. It's the phase I was talking to you before. And it's very important to sort of say that, can you please tell me what, in 2 lines, can you tell me how you're involved in this project? How you connect to this particular initiative? By doing this, it just relaxes the atmosphere a lot. And people get comfortable, but make sure that you really tell them only 2 or 3 minutes to talk about how they were linked to the project, because most of the time, or I've never been able to use the information that they say it when you say during this point in your coding or analysis or in your reporting. It just helps you to understand better that maybe some questions in your topic guide need to be skipped because these people are not going to be able to answer them. So it just helps you on the spot and to relax the person that you're interviewing. When you're developing your interview guides, try to make sure that the questions start with what, how, or why. If they're not generally starting with these 3, they're going to generally probably be close-ended questions. The other thing that I wanted to suggest that you look into is appreciative inquiry. Tessie Katsambas does some training on this, and there's some other people who are quite good about it. And what it is about formulating your questions in a positive way. So instead of saying, what challenge did you face? XYZ, you say, what could you have done better on this project? And just putting that positive spin makes people think that you're not criticizing, and it just changes the way they respond to your questions. But I can't go into detail of appreciative inquiry now. So it's something worth looking into. The other thing I wanted to suggest that you look into is blindfolding. So blindfolding is something that's become very popular from the QIP, which is called Qualitative Impact Protocol. It's a methodology that evaluators are using. But what I find really interesting about blindfolding is if you, for example, go into a refugee camp or into a village, you say, and say your project is about renewable energy. You ask them that in terms of renewable energy, are you seeing any difference? So they will, then what you're looking for in blindfolding is, do they mention the project you're evaluating or not? And that's, I found really interesting to see whether that program is actually contributing to change. But blindfolding is a big topic that, again, you can just look into. But these are things that I use in my interview guides, topic guides, to just play around a lot of them. Obviously, if you're being introduced by the project managers and all of this kind of thing doesn't work. But it works in certain instances. The other thing is, make sure that you're always having probing, especially in semi-structured interviews. So can you tell me more about that? That's really interesting. What are your feelings about that, etc., etc. So always listen and keep probing during your interview. Clarifying questions. When you clarify anything in an interview, make sure that you use the same words the person you're interviewing used. So don't use a different term for the same meaning, because then it can lead you to have misleading answers, because the person might have a different understanding of the same term. So never, when you're probing or clarifying questions, use different terminology than the one that's been used. And now, how to handle irrelevant answers and cross questions. I just normally say, sorry, I don't want to take up too much of your time, and we have a lot of questions to go through. Can you, maybe we can come back to this at a later stage. Or sometimes if the question is really important, I ask it in a different way. But you have to gauge it. You have to see the person who's interviewing. Is this person, do you think he'll be able to answer the question? He or she will be able to answer the question, or not really? In terms of cross questions, unless it's too much, I would answer them. It's what we talked about, building rapport. It's very, very important to reply to any question that's being asked by the person you're interviewing. Obviously, there's a balance here, but if you, during the question and answer of this, if you want to come off mute and talk to me about it, maybe I can clarify that. Also, just the last thing is, when you develop your interview topic guide, don't forget to test it. So test it on a few people before you actually go to the interview, or test if you don't have people to test it on less important candidates. And you'll always, after the first few interviews, have to tailor it. You'll say that, oh no, that shouldn't have been done that way, or you'll have to restructure the order of the questions. So yeah, do that. And often, if you feel that someone is a really good respondent, I ask them, can you give me some feedback about the interview? Not about your interviewing skills, just about if they found some questions irrelevant or could be improved. But you have to be really careful with this one. Don't do it with everyone. Don't do it with a very senior person. Just play it by ear. So be very careful with when asking for feedback. The other thing is, if you're in a team of evaluators, ask your team. I'm just going to rush through because I'm running a bit late with this. Ranika, I'm just going to take 5 more minutes if that's okay. Is it? Praveen?
Yes, Tarun, I think that's fine. Yes. Okay.
So in terms of effective note-taking, that was one of the questions. I suggest practice. There's no way of getting better. I've seen anthropologists, they are considered to be very, very good at note-taking because they normally have to observe, and they look and they take notes without looking at the paper. And this, if you can develop this skill, I've seen many evaluators who have anthropological backgrounds do this, and it's really, really effective. But you have to learn to practice to take note for note-taking. I personally never transcribe, absolutely never. I never have the budget for this, and the amount of time it takes to use transcription software and take note by note in qualitative analysis, it's so time consuming. Unless you have a huge project budget, I would not recommend you transcribe. I have about 6-7 software for you, which I'll put in the chat. Yeah, one thing that I always use when I'm interviewing people, and this is a senior evaluator taught me this, is when I ask the question, I paraphrase what's been said. So I said that, so you said X, Y, Z, and this confirms my understanding, but that part, that paragraph basically becomes the notes that go into my coding and analysis. So by being a very active listener and repeating what the person has said, not the whole thing, the main point of it, you confirm that your notes are correct, but you also have an easier time when you're doing your coding. So that's just a pointer. Techniques for coding and analysis. I'm just going to quickly tell you that I normally don't do more than 2 interviews a day. Again, it depends on your budget and if you're on a field, and you know, when people are in the field, I know in our business, it can be like 4 interviews a day, 5 interviews a day, but I really don't recommend this, because every time I do an interview, I go do my notes and analysis and coding the same day of the same interview, and then I'll do the next interview, because you don't know what's emerging. You know, you need to keep up with what's emerging and such. So for me, it's not just doing an interview, it's doing the interview, it's doing the notes, it's doing the coding, and looking at a bit of the analysis. So that's why I suggest that 2 per day. So one of the questions here was how to determine and frame questions, how to avoid bias in selecting root causes rather than symptoms from the responses, and detecting lies from truth. So this is a really good question. It's a complex question, but there are 3 things I suggest. One is peer debriefing. So if you can, if you have a team leader or someone else who did the interview with you, talk to them about what you guys are finding. So this can be a really interesting way of trying to find patterns and removing your own personal biases. The other thing is you present your findings, so participant verification. So once you've done your analysis, you sort of present them, and then some people correct it. It normally happens. This is before writing your report. And probably the other thing that I could say is that look into reflexivity, which is where an evaluator sits down, you journal, what are your biases, what are you thinking? So right after an interview, what you felt, what you liked, what you didn't like. Some people even record themselves, or when they're looking at their notes after the interview, they have half an hour for reflexivity to understand what they're doing to really remove their biases. Again, this just depends on you as a person and how sort of dedicated you want to be on these things. Okay, I'm going to stop there, but in terms of my top tip for interviewing, I will just say it's one thing, and that is silence is a good thing. Silence is a really important thing. Many times in an interview, I slowly count till 10, and wait for someone to reply to my questions. That's some of the most effective interviewing. I never interrupt them. I just quietly wait, and that's probably my top tip for what you can do best when you're interviewing people. Thanks, and I'm so sorry to have run over a bit.
Thank you, Taruna. I think the time was fine. I really appreciate many tips that you have given. Personally, I also learned a lot from this session. I especially like your point on being very responsive during the interview. I'm sure all of our participants found the session very useful. So I'm going to open the floor for the question and answer. So I'd like to invite our participants, if you have any questions, please unmute yourself, or if you prefer to type in the chat, that is fine as well. Yeah, Akbar, I see a hand raised. Please, Akbar, you are unmute yourself and please put your question.
Hello,
Hello?
are you getting me?
Yes, Akbar?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I just want to ask if you can suggest or name any software you recommend to analyze the qualitative data or the interview data, I would say.
Yeah, so
Preferably
right.
the software which could easily available or we can purchase.
Okay, so thanks for the question, Akbar. I use NVivo, but the problem with NVivo is extremely expensive. But normally what I do is, because I have different evaluations in the year, I spread the budget of the software. So I think right now it's really crazy. It's about 1,800 GBP. So what I do is, if I'm doing 10 evaluations, I put 200 for software. I know that most people can't do this. There's Deduce, which a lot of people are using. Deduce. Praveen, do you know, can you guys just type this, Deduce? Thanks, thanks, Ritu. Atlas TI, I don't know the prices of this, but these are the three that when I've worked with people, they've used Deduce, Atlas TI, and NVivo. A lot of people use Deduce because you don't need to have coding skills for it. That's what I'm told, but I've never used it. I've only ever been trained and taught NVivo. Yeah, so Ritu is just saying that Deduce is cheaper, but she didn't like it much. For me, look, you know, the other thing you can do is just use an Excel spreadsheet. It's very easy, even if you go on YouTube and say, learn coding using Excel spreadsheets. Before I knew NVivo and I could afford to pay for it, like some clients would not pay for it, I used to just do it on Excel. So that's my suggestion, that just Google YouTube coding on Excel, qualitative coding. If you can't, but those are the three software I use.
Thank you, Taruna, for the response, and also thank you, Akbar, for the question. I would like to open the floor for more questions. So if any other participants have a question, please feel free to unmute yourself and put your question. Yeah, I see a hand raised from from Ritu. Ritu, please go ahead and put your question.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi, Taruna. You were so
Hi,
amazing.
Ritu.
Very humble to learn from you. Yeah, I don't know theory. I'm just a practitioner who works. Yeah. So like I was very fascinated by something you mentioned, folding.
But blindfolding, yeah, I'll put it in
Yeah.
the text.
Yes. So there's I'm just thinking there can be a risk in the sense communities, like I work primarily in Asia and Africa, and communities may not know the name of the project. Okay, if it's a thematic, like I
Mhm.
also into, like, if for example a project is on gender or a project is on community engagement, yeah. So if we just ask, and there's no branding in the project where you guys, okay, we are using this approach with you, okay, and then so the risk is, if we go and ask the community this, then it's there, the description, as you said, is very important, rather than name of the project, because the community may not know the name of the project. So explanation, because this is, I faced this in an evaluation where some of my teammates went and interviewed and they say, oh, this, nothing has been done here, but it was how in qualitative is how you frame and present to the community, because they have knowledge. It is, I think it's about us valuing their lived experience and not
Yeah.
dismissing it. So Taruna, that is just an observation, and really liked that term and learned from you.
Thanks. So Ritu, just to be clear, that blindfolding is not for everything, right? It's part of a methodology, QUIP, which I'll put a QUIP. It's qualitative impact protocol. And it was just a suggestion that, do you know, sometimes when you go into communities, because they keep being interviewed, right? They're
Right.
so exhausted. It's not just evaluators, it's researchers, it's donors going for needs assessments, all of these things. They're just fed up, right? So blindfolding was a suggestion, and I should have clarified it. I was just running through my slides at the end, is that if you want to use a completely different approach with someone in a village and you just want to go sit by them and say that I've heard, I'm here, I would just wanted to talk about, like I said, renewable energy, what's been happening in the village about it. And, you know, you come up, you see what interventions they're talking about. Are they talking about the interventions under your project, or are they not? And so for me, it was just a different way of understanding contribution analysis. So is your project actually contributing? Is it actually coming up? Because it was just a different approach to the villages or communities. But I completely agree with you that you have to understand that is this approach that should be used in this context. And I used the example of refugee camps because it's like this closed, especially UNHCR camps where I did an evaluation before, they're just closed and people are constantly on these people's cases. So blindfolding to understand, is it your project or someone else? Because many times you mention the project and they come up with stories, right? Because they want to stay on the good side, because they're recipients of, say, free solar panels, this. So yeah, this is sort of where I was getting to.
No, I think I found it, I think, very sharp and very intelligent way. I was just thinking how to do it. So thanks for bringing that clarity.
Yeah, if you look at the Quip, Ritu, you're going to find a lot of tips about how they go about blindfolding. That's an integral part of their methodology. I've just stolen it for my interview. When
okay,
I do
I'm
interviews,
stealing
yeah.
from you.
Please go
And
ahead.
I'll get back to you. Yeah,
Sure.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ritu, for the question. I think there was a very interesting discussion on blindfolding. Of course, we are learning a lot from each other. Instead of stealing, I would say learning. So if you have any more questions, I think we still have few minutes for the question. Once again, like, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and put your question. So I don't see any more questions. So I would like to take this opportunity, Taruna, for a question from my side. So I also have been doing interviews for quite some time, and one challenge that I face is while doing interview with women, it is often that they are in their own like house with their family, and it's often that they have children with them, sometimes like very young children, or sometimes like even 7, 8 year old. So I kind of face challenge and like, should the interviewee be in on when we do interviews, or is it fine if we have their like children? Again, like how old the children could be. So I was just like struggling with that part. So if you could, help me with some guidance on that, that would be great.
So my position on this is that I think if a mother is able to have her children away from her, then you can sort of suggest that. But most of the time, the reason that the children are with them is they don't have them anywhere to send them, right? And to build rapport and to make them comfortable, just because the child might interrupt them, don't put them in that position. Don't create a complication because you're interviewing them. I would say that take very good notes or put a star when, say, they're talking something and mid-sentence they've stopped. Put an underline of what they were saying. So when they're interrupted and they come back, they haven't forgotten what they were talking about. You say that you were talking about this. So help them through the interview and support them. But I wouldn't, it doesn't matter what age the child is. I have two and they're monkeys, and it's hard sometimes. I don't have childcare. So what do I do? Yeah.
Thank you, Darren. I think that was very helpful. I'm just checking the chat to see if there is any question. I think there's a question from Yatin. So I'll just read out the question. When doing interviews, as part of a program evaluation, we end up talking to similarly placed individuals with similar experiences. So I end up getting a bit detached from the interview when doing similar thing a third, fourth time. So how do you overcome this fatigue? So this is a question from me, I think, Diwakar. So Taruna, would you like to quickly respond this one?
Yeah, Yatin, I'm not clear if you're talking about similar placed with similar experiences. Are you talking about they're saying the same thing over and over again? And that's exhausting for you, because basically for me, that's you have reached saturation, right? So you've reached saturation and you don't need to continue the interviewing. You're just, if you continue interviewing at that stage, you're doing it as a tick box exercise, not because those respondents are giving you new information. For me, that's the point at which you say that we don't need to talk to this subgroup anymore. And I normally then say that to use the evaluation resources better to find other people. One other tip that obviously I forgot because I was talking so much is that I always snowball. At the end of every interview at my interview guide, I'm like, do you think there would be someone interesting to interview? Also, Yatin, one thing that's really interesting is that when you're doing an evaluation for a program, the project managers who give you a list of the people to be interviewed, they know all the people who are going to say something bad and all the people who are going to say something good. And the list will always, always have the good one, right? Good ones. You have to take your own initiative through your desk research, through snowballing. And I normally find social media really good. I always really search the project on social media. And just on my last interview, we uncovered something huge from social media. So I would suggest that if this is happening and you're getting this detachment, it means that you're learning nothing new. You need to stop that interviewing that kind of people and look at like what you call similarly placed individuals and look at a different niche if possible. I don't know if that answers the question. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Taruna, and thank you, Yavin, for the question. So I think that was a very interesting discussion on snowballing as well as use of social media in getting more contextual information. In interest of time, I will move on. So now it's time for a group picture. So I'll stop sharing my screen for a while. And then if you could all turn on your camera for a group picture, that would be great. I guess Randika or Madhika will be helping us to snap the group picture.
Madhurika, over to you.
I'm going to take the group picture and I request all of you, if you are able, please switch on your camera. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to take the picture now. Have a good smile. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Now we'll move ahead with the closing remarks.
Thank you, Praveen. So I think very nice to hear you, Taruna, and from others as well. I think one important aspect of this entire discussion is that how important is the interview process in the entire evaluation process and planning and design. I've made few notes which I could touch upon as Taruna had explained it very well. So a few pointers, one important pointer to start with is observation and be a good listener while you are in the interviewing process with as part of the evaluation assignment, and don't get biased. And most important, break the ice and build the rapport with the person you are interviewing. Choice of sample and the process of selection, and also open up a communication channel, how you would like to structure your interview process in if it is online or if it is offline, you need to prepare it well in advance. And then knowing them in particular, the understanding the group dynamics as well, if you're addressing a community or even an individual, it should be participatory in nature, which is very important to get the information that is needed. And she also talked about that one good interview could be within a time limit of 15 minutes. I think that's something we all learned as well. And most important, understanding the power dynamics and how you also present yourself in terms of making your presence felt, whether how well you're dressed depending on the situation of the interview that you're taking on, whether if it's a village setting or even if it's a office or a corporate setting. And the other aspect she also talked about being anonymous in the process of and having confidentiality and building the confidence from the other side to take on be open about the discussion. It is not disclosed otherwise. And she also mentioned about a match analysis that is important in the entire process of going through, if you're in specific talking to the government officials for the interview process. Then and the last one I would talk about is he also talked about a guide which will determine the entire process, how you're going to conduct the entire interview process, build it at the design stage so that you are well informed and well planned and you get the questions right. It's more important is asking the right questions to get the answers you actually want them, and also putting it in subtle manner that it makes it comfortable for the person that you're interviewing. So she also talked about interesting approach, keeping silence after asking the question in an interview and make a count of 1 to 10. So now I would like to thank all the participants who have been onboarded for the winter school. I'm sure you will have an interesting journey ahead in learning and also making a practice in your future endeavors. And thank you, Taruna, for your wonderful presentation and making us enlightened with your learning and your experience. And most importantly, you have been an independent working and you're also managing several different diverse projects. And then I would like to thank the entire team of organizers who have put this together, and then especially to APIA, Evaluate Asia, Evaluate Global, and Eval Action, and the APC Hub as well, and other partners. And for thank you for the opening remarks from Bimba Sureen, and thank you for moderating the session, Praveen. And lastly, I would also thank all the participants, organizations, and the speakers for taking this and to an interesting lead of learning. Thank you. Over to you, Praveen.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Biswajit. Sorry, my power just went off, so I am connecting from mobile. I'm not able to share the screen. So if someone could share the screen, that would be great. Rantika or Madhuka, if you can share the screen, that would be great.
Yes, I will share it.
Yeah, thank you, Rantika. Yeah, thank you, Biswajit, for that closing remarks and also summarizing the presentation and also giving credit to our wonderful facilitator. So I would just like to inform about the upcoming winter school training. So the upcoming winter school training is on 25th October 2023. It is on focused group discussion for evaluation studies. it is being moderated by Uga, who is co-leader from Evaluate South Asia, and we'll again have Taruna, our wonderful facilitator from today. So we have some more information about this follow-up training. So I would like to request Taruna for some additional information about this follow-up training. Yeah, thank you.
The links are here in the chat, and I just wanted to say that from the questions today, as you can see, I built a completely tailored training to this, to the questions that were asked. So if you can ask very specific, very clear questions, it will be maybe easier for me to tailor the training to focus group discussions.
Randika is
Praveen, can you hear me? Hello?
I think he's having network issues. Go ahead, Taruna.
Okay. Yeah, so just to let everyone know that if you can please fill in that questionnaire as soon as possible. So it takes time to develop these sort of trainings as well. So if you can please just fill them in with your questions about focus group discussions, but be as clear as possible in your question, that will be really helpful. Thank you.
Praveen, are you there?
Randika, I think Praveen is not
Okay,
here.
so yeah, I'll continue. So this is so we'll be having our 4th APIA conference and Evaluation Asia in Manila, Philippines, 4th to the 7th, so that you can scan and register. Registrations are open. Here's the barcode, so everyone, you can take a picture and visit our website as well. So that's it for this training. See you all in the next training on October 25th. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to our speakers and moderator.